Hey, welcome back to God's Glory and Men's Real Stories. I'm your host, Robert Moore III. I'm excited that you would join us today for another great episode. And if you're new to this community, I want you to know that you matter here and your story matters no matter what chapter you're in. So today, I want you to sit back with a community that cares about you in hopes that you feel God's love as well as see God's glory in men's real stories. My special guest today is a brother I met through his wife, who initially came to me and said, I would love to join you on your podcast to talk about my journey. Now, as much as God knew I wanted this to be just that, a podcast of men and women's stories, he was adamant about my calling into men's lives, as I now understand how much men need to hold space and walk alongside one another. So with that said, I'm excited to sit down with her husband today and want to welcome Robby Bunzey to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to actually sit across from a person who walked in my door and was like, "Dude, I have no idea what we're talking about today." And I was like, "Awesome. Yes, that's perfect."
Yeah, first podcast. I have no idea where we're going with this, but I'm open to it. We'll step into what God's called us to do and
awesome.
Go from there.
That's great. That's great. Well, let's start off with letting you introduce yourself to everybody.
Sure. So,
Yeah.
So, I'm Robby. Have, like you mentioned, my wife, a beautiful wife who I love very much. I have 4 wonderful kids. Most of the time, wonderful. We live here in Waxhaw, close to Charlotte. Been here. I've been in the area for almost my entire life, so I've seen it all kind of blow up over the years, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad. I love nothing more than when a person walks in and says, "I have no idea what we're talking about," because at that point I know that God is going to work through the conversation to say, "Hey, look, this is what you're talking about." Because there are so many times I remember back then I used to keep an iPad here and I used to have like little questions just in case the person got quiet on me. I could be like, "Okay, like run to it," and now it's just like, you know what, God, that was kind of like that was my crutch that I had in place, and just in case you didn't step in to save the day. So now it's more like, you know what, God, I'm giving the conversations over to you. I know that in these moments, that's where God can kind of say, you know what, there's something that actually I want to reach somebody through, but you know what, though, I'm actually going to soften his heart in a way to where he surrenders that over to somebody, or they surrender that over, or they talk about this topic, because I know in those moments, not only does it create a space where it kind of heals a piece of us, but it heals another guy who everything that you just said resonates with them.
Oh, yeah.
In a manner. And so I realize that's so powerful. We really need that in these areas. So like with that said, like I want to kind of give you the floor. I love to create that space where it's like, hey, look, I'd love to give you the floor to kind of like maybe talk about some of the things that you feel you that have been on your heart lately, that have kind of maybe whether it may have felt like a weight on you, or maybe it was something that you recognize was just like, hey, look, I'm so glad to have gotten through that storm. Like that storm, I didn't know if I had it in me, but that storm kind of seemed like one that was a lot worse than the other ones, and that I didn't know if I'd make it through that sane. I didn't know if I would make it through that the same way when I walked into it, knowing that I didn't know what God had on the other side of it.
Wow. So I will say, as you were talking, I had like a million things going through my head, different experiences, and some of the things we touched on, but even before we started. But the first thing that's popping in my mind is, I guess I'll jump to kind of the power of a testimony and how important that is for men to experience, because I feel like at least me and I assume most men probably were brought up to kind of hold things in, pull up your bootstraps, move on, and don't feel like you have permission to feel those things or have those vulnerabilities. And when somebody gives a testimony, especially in a men's group or, just here, one-on-one, and they open up, it gives that other person kind of that permission to reach in and feel those things. And it's okay. I can talk about this. I can feel that. So I think that's one of the things that just jumped in my head. If you're talking personal stories, I've got a bunch. that I could probably look at in terms of those storms. The one I think, and we touched on this as well, that has been hitting in my head for the past, I think, 24 hours, just kind of multiple coincidences, we'll say,
Right.
which we know there aren't any of those. I went through a time where I lost my mom in 2019, and we had kind of I wouldn't say a bad relationship. We had a good relationship. I loved her very much, but there, growing up, there was things that weren't always perfect, and she, not going to go through the whole story, but in 2019, she was in a bad place, and very depressed. Had kind of put herself kind of away from everyone else, and she had previously been a cancer survivor, and it just done a toll on her body. And eventually, this took a toll, and she had to go to the hospital. And she was in the hospital for a couple months. And so we were there, every day, Thanksgiving through Christmas and the holidays, and away from family, trying to make sure she was okay. And again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but fast forward, she got better, and she got home. And she was fine. She was having patient in care. And it was my turn to go pick her up from the hospital. And I got there, and she wasn't answering her phone, which wasn't, out of the norm. But she wasn't answering the doors when I got there. I had to bust in. I looked all over the house. I couldn't find her. And then I found her on the floor. And I had to call 911. They wanted me to administer CPR. I knew she was already gone, but I had to do it anyways, which was a horrifying experience. That was something pretty difficult to go through. And that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was after that, after we got through her passing and the funeral and everything else, I found myself feeling nothing. And it wasn't a feeling of anger, sadness. It was a feeling of emptiness. And I couldn't be there for my family. I couldn't be close to my wife. I told her, she would ask me what's wrong. I remember telling her one time that I'd lost my joy. And it went on like that for a little while. And I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I just, it's weird. It's really indescribable when you just don't feel anything.
Right.
And you just kind of going through the motions. And it went on for a little while, and I prayed. And, look, one of the things I really believe in is that there are miracles that do happen, and that you have to recognize them. They're all around you.
Right.
But we choose to kind of not recognize them.
Right.
And, there were a couple miracles. Well, actually, there was a lot that I would say, maybe not by the standard definition of a miracle, but for me, they were. One was that I got my joy back suddenly. I was in church, and we were, in worship, and I had been praying, and I was praying, and it hit me like a bolt of lightning, and it just came back. And I remember grabbing Kelsey and telling her, I was like, my joy's back.
Right.
And it was just an amazing feeling. And then as I kind of look back at everything I had happened, I saw some other things happen. And you see, my mom was in a really bad place for a really long time. She didn't feel loved. She was in deep depression, abusing alcohol, and that's ultimately with, her medical conditions, and that compounded is what led to, her ultimate death. But there was a moment after she had gotten back from the hospital, where I was at her house and I was sitting with her, and she looked at me and she said, I can't believe how wrong I was. You guys were with me day in and day out through the hospital. I'm so loved. I'm so loved, and I can't believe I didn't see that and didn't recognize that. It wasn't too long after that she died. And I look back and I honestly believe that God kept her alive just long enough. Because she was not in a good place when she went to the hospital.
Right.
And the doctors came out many times and told us, like, that this isn't good. Like, at any given time while she was there, she should have passed. But it's like he kept her alive long enough that she could realize that she was loved before she had to go. So I look at that and I say, hey, man, that's a miracle.
Right.
That happened.
Right. Sometimes, and it's crazy how sometimes it's not necessarily a miracle that we look at as like, wow, that was a blessing to me, but sometimes we're experiencing a miracle through another person.
Yeah.
That blesses us in a way of like, I'm glad she experienced that, because there are a lot of us who do walk through life kind of like with that chip on our shoulder of, I don't feel loved. I don't feel it, and we don't recognize it, even if it's right in front of us.
Right in front of us, right. And it was like, that was the biggest blessing, I think, is for her to have experienced that and to have felt that. And for me to be able to hear her say it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's not just that she got to experience it, but I got to witness it.
Right.
So that was awesome. And then, I told you I was in a bad place for a little while, and then it came back. And I can't remember all the sequence of events, but because it's been a while. But I have 4 kids,
right.
three boys, and that's a whole other story, and probably why Kelsey wanted to tell you her journey.
Right.
But our 4th is a baby girl, and she's beautiful. But we were never planning on having another child. And if you want to think of something really crazy, she was conceived the night my mom died.
Wait, what?
She was conceived the night my mom died. We traced it back. And let me tell you, if God wanted to put something in your path to make you believe that he was there for you and bringing you back from that dark place, words can't describe it.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's kind of, it's crazy.
Wow. So wait, so you said that when your mom died, it kind of left a serious strain on you. It kind of like took everything out of you, almost like you felt like you were numb.
Yeah.
And in that same day, your daughter was born?
The same day she passed, my daughter was conceived.
Okay.
Yeah, so 9 months later.
Oh,
she was born.
Okay. I totally.
Which was, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
okay, mind blown.
So my mom passed. 9 months later, I have a baby girl to take care of.
Wow.
Entered my life.
Wow. You right. Yeah, that's unreal. That is wow.
And like I said, there are no coincidences, right?
Nah, I've totally learned. Like, matter of fact, there got to a point where there were so many coincidences in my life. I remember somebody telling me, that's God in disguise. And he loves to do that. And it's almost like him winking at you, because I started to experience things, even like the conversation we had right before we started here, where it was like, okay, like, what's the chances that I would actually just out of the blue start talking about something that you literally had just felt like people had kept hitting on?
People kept hitting on it.
Yeah.
Like 4 different people within an 8-hour period.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, I guess I need to talk about it, because you're obviously hitting it over my head over and over again.
Right.
So let's do it.
No, that's awesome. And you know what? I'm glad you shared that, because what actually sparked the conversations that we were talking about, like sometimes the relationships we have with their moms. As men, normally we all remember the relationships we have with our dads, if we had dads in our lives. But the relationships we have with our moms is completely different, because it was the one that we went to a lot of times for the affection that we needed.
That's right.
She's the one that we went to when if we fell down and we really seriously hurt ourselves, we knew not to go to dad.
Right.
We knew, if anything else, he was going to pour alcohol on it, Benadryl on it, you're fine. And take
You're fine.
Right.
And I do that to my kids, unfortunately. I'm like, you're fine.
You're fine.
Yeah.
You're good. Yeah. And it's like, but you know that mom has that way of like kind of letting you know that it's okay that you want to cry right now.
Right.
It's okay that you may not feel up to continuing or completing. And even though as men we step back and we're like, no, he's got to finish this out. A lot of times moms almost give the boys permission, us men permission to say it's okay to not be okay right now. It's okay to be hurting right now. It's okay to say that truly hurt instead of just kind of like try to hide it behind a stern, stoic face. And I've learned that like there is an importance in having that balance, because a lot of times when you don't have that balance, you grow up to feel like I have to push through. I have to be strong. Everybody in my life told me that I don't have permission to cry, that I have to be a man.
Yeah.
That I have to be strong. And so when you don't get that permission and you kind of go through life, not that you're looking for it, but you don't realize that you needed it all this time to actually say, I'm tired. Like,
yeah.
And it's okay. You're tired. Go take a nap. Like we didn't get that enough from maybe the male figures in our life, because it was well, you can sleep when I sleep, and I'll sleep when I'm tired and when I'm done with the day, and we're gonna work through the day. And it's like, okay, all right, we got to earn our keep here. We got to work. We got to make the money, and it's like we got to earn our worth. And those were things that echoed in my head of like, wow, okay, all right. Well, when do I finally earn my worth? Like, when does that day come? And I feel like a lot of times, sometimes we don't ever find that day. We don't ever get that day.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, depending on how you're brought up, you know, it's kind of like, you know, toughen up, but you pull up by your bootstraps, right, and move on. And then it also, you know, I think a lot of us are, you know, kind of brought up with a, you know, competitive, you know, style. And it's good to be competitive, but it's almost to a point where, you know, I need to compete with everything, and I need to be tough, and I need to keep moving. I keep accomplishing this. I can accomplish that. I need to accomplish that. And it's like, man, you know, for a while there, that can be even productive and constructive.
Right.
But if that's the only thing, you know, you learn, or at least I've learned, that you can accomplish a lot in what the world would consider, you know, accomplishments, but there's not anything at the end, right? Like, it's
very empty.
It's very empty.
Yeah.
And so what are the things that you really value? And look, I struggle with this all the time. Like, you know, I think, you know, even you were talking about earlier, you know, seeing the blessings and having them right in front of you and not even recognizing them, right? How many of us do that? Like, you know, we're so busy competing or trying to do better. We're not even recognizing what's right in front of our face. Right. Like, look at all these blessings that I have. Like,
right. No, and it's okay. So I've recently contributed maybe some of the ones that I personally overlooked to the fact that I had an expectation of how I was expecting the blessing to look.
Oh yeah.
And when I'm waiting for a certain thing to show up in a certain color or a certain manner or whatever the case may be, then I'm overlooking the blessing that's right in front of me that God said I need it this way, according to my will. And it's my way, right? It's not your way. It's my plan, right? It's not your plan. And so it's almost like a way of him checking us to say, if it's my will and it's my plan, then this is the vehicle we're going to get there in. This is the way we're going to get there.
Yeah. And it's oftentimes uncomfortable, you know? So
all right. So yes. Uncomfortable is an understatement, because you've already kind of set your taste up. Your taste buds up.
Well, I want to do it this way. This is easy for me. This makes sense to me. And it's like, no. You needed to go do it this way. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to step into that.
Right.
That's, you know, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel good. It's not comfortable.
Lane. Right.
Yeah.
I don't have the qualifications for that. I don't know anything about that. And basically all we're saying, like you said, is it's discomfort. It's something that is unknown. It's something that we don't want to do a lot of times because it doesn't give us that warm and fuzzy feeling like what our expectations look like.
Yeah.
That would have gave me, like, I would have loved that. And it's like, guys, like, yeah, but you're going to love what happens doing it this way.
Yeah. I mean, how many times, if you look back, could you say that some of the biggest blessings you got were not because of what you planned, was because of it went a certain way that you weren't expecting, and you got the benefit from it. You know, like if you kind of look back in your life and you just look at the times that how you even got where you are, was that what you planned?
Right. Ooh. No, I couldn't have even wrote a story that good.
No, and I tell my kids sometimes, I'm like, thank God that I'm not limited by my imagination.
Right.
Because it would be so small.
Right. I mean, like, yeah, I would have, and you know what? I had a conversation with a guy recently where he said, you know, I was just wanting to get off this block. I never thought I would be outside of the city that I grew up in, outside of the neighborhood. I literally went from what I just wanted a little, my imagination took me as far as what I saw in my community. But now literally God had more in plan for me. He had more written out for me. But he wanted to see how much I would trust him as I moved forward, as I stepped outside of my neighborhood, as I stepped outside of my community to see what he could do in other areas, not only through my life, but through other people's lives, of where I've interacted with people who have opened up doors for me that are like, okay, wait, like, what's the catch? Like I was good just last month when I hit that milestone or that goal that I had for myself, but you're telling me you want to open up this door for me? Like, that wasn't in my, I didn't see that. And that's just, that type of stuff sometimes just blows my mind. Like, I'm like, wait, like, God, you have a whole different imagination of what you want, what you're trying to do if we trust you. It's just a lot of times we trust what we feel like we can get in our own strength.
Yeah. And that is, as you're saying that too, I'm thinking to myself, like, how many of those things are even, I want to say obvious, like things that you know you should do, but you choose not to. Going back to the comfort thing, right? Like, I think there's a lot about God and what we hear that makes a lot of sense to us, but we can't reconcile it to put it into practice.
Okay.
So yeah, I think about, I don't know, there's a bunch of scenarios running through my head when you said it, but you know, I think we kind of touched on this as well earlier. As a father, so for the folks that are fathers out there, you know, when you're was born and you've held him for the first time, I know for me, and I've talked with others, that something just clicks. You know, something in you changes. And you know, when you look at your children, like, you're not always happy with them, but you always love them.
Right.
And that's an easy thing for you to understand, having that bond, that there is a Father in heaven that loves you no matter what.
Right.
There's nothing you can do.
Right.
To him not love you less or more. Right. So that's something that you can understand, but yet it's very hard, I think, for some, including myself, to always believe that with our Father in heaven. And so knowing it and believing it enough to put it in practice can be two different things.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And you know, from the other side of the coin, sometimes I've always looked at it from a standpoint of like, I've had this thing where out of sight, out of mind, and not having a father to grow up with, you know, to then be told, well, your heavenly Father wants a relationship with you, but I don't see him just like I don't see my father. It made it really hard to try to understand how I could have a relationship with somebody who I couldn't see in the stands at my games, who I couldn't see in the stand at my graduation, and know that they're struggling with things that I can't do anything about, but I need them just as much as they may feel the need to want to fill their life with other things that they're still trying to get a grip on. And it was always hard to say, yeah, I want to trust a God who I've never seen, who I don't recognize how he's shown up in my life. But yeah, I just want that relationship with him.
Yeah, that's hard to reconcile, not having someone there and then being told that there's, this ultimate love. That's like a complete polar opposite.
Right.
And such a big gap to fill.
Right.
I mean, between the two, I can't relate. I can't imagine.
Yeah, and it's funny because I say all that, never truly opening up my heart to experience him and his love until I did. And it is crazy how, like, when I try to describe it to people, and I describe this from a standpoint of, like, this isn't like some old relationship, my story kind of plays in that I really got back into a relationship with God in 2021, or actually 2022, at the end of 2021, 2022, when I got to a place where I surrendered and wanted to see what he could do in someone who was broken and done. And I remember the first thing he did was he poured his love on me to where it was like I didn't feel like I was deserving of that love. Because like you said, as a father, it kind of flips a switch where you have a love for a person that you want to do whatever it takes to care for that person, to provide for that person.
Right.
And the love you've given, but a lot of times we've never received that love that we feel for that person. And so we're going off instinct of like, I'm gonna give you everything I was never given. And I don't know what that looks like, but I'm gonna give it to you.
Well, and it's based off of humans and human behavior. And we're not capable of that level of, forgiveness.
Right.
And so it's really hard to comprehend. And I think you said you were at a point where you were broken, and I think just like men have a hard time being vulnerable, and being taught not to be strong. Mm-hmm. I think there's also the aspect of that shame and the things that you've done in your life that along the way, you've done maybe some things that weren't great,
right?
And you are judging yourself,
right?
And so it's like, it's hard for me to believe that this ultimate being is going to be able to forgive me and love me because I can't forgive myself.
There it is. Yeah. No. And you're right. That's exactly how you tell yourself, like, you couldn't love me more than I could love myself, and I don't forgive me. So why would you forgive me? And that's a heavy weight, like, because it's to realize that. I think this is the one that really hit me the hardest. Not only do you forgive me, but you don't see me the way I continue to fester on the things that I've done. Like, you don't hold that weight.
Exactly. Just like you as a father wouldn't hold that weight against your kid, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's not the same. I mean, obviously God's love for us is more than we can, but there are parallels there, right? Mm-hmm. But I think you're right. And I'll give a shout out because I have an awesome men's group and they provide a lot of great insights. There's some really great men in that. But they brought up this aspect of, shame and carrying that, and that, that's one of the things that you have to kind of free yourself of. Because as long as you're carrying that with you, you're putting like a blocker, in between you and God.
Yeah.
And you're not letting yourself become what you were meant to be.
Right.
So it's, you've got, and that's not easy. And I think we all go through seasons where it's, easier and harder, right?
Right.
But that, you got to remember that he doesn't care.
Right.
It's in the past. Let it go. Become what you were meant to be through him.
Right. And I love how you just gave a shout out, because you know what? I want to say that there are those times where we go through those storms that sometimes we fail to remember what he's done previously in our past. And it's in those communities we have, those men's groups,
absolutely,
that truly pick us up and encourage us and walk alongside us to say, look, listen to me, I get it. You're going through a storm I was just in last month, and I'm here to tell you that you know what, he'll see you through that. They encourage you. They remind you where to focus, how to seek God, even in the midst of the storm. And I always use the analogy of, like, I love when people, or even myself sometimes, can regulate how I'm feeling to calm down. And in the midst of everything going crazy, I can go and sit back in the back of the boat with God and just say, you know what? If you're not worried, then why am I worried with the storm that's going on right now?
Oh, man. Yeah.
Like, so I'm going to sit back because there's something you know that I don't know, that I should just sit back and wait and see what you're going to do in the midst of this. And so that just those men's groups, those men pouring into other men, you know, I will say that my men's group, and I'm in a couple of them, I love those communities. I love those men. I appreciate what they have done for me, and I appreciate how they have held me accountable and how they walked alongside me. And for any men who are listening, I will tell you that community of men is important, not from a standpoint of judgment or shame, but from a standpoint of, yeah, I can't judge you or shame you for what you're going through. And sometimes I've carried the same shame, the same guilt from the things I've done. So in all of this, I can feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable with you guys, to share what I'm going through in this current season, what happened in last season, what I did that I'm just like, I can't believe I told y'all that, but like, I can't believe I did that. That like, I can't even look myself in the mirror at what I've done. And in the midst of all that, you guys tell me that he still forgives me. He'll still, he doesn't hold on to that. He doesn't continue to say, well, you got to make up for that. You got to, that's going to cost you.
Right.
But he completely wipes me debt free, and lets me know that he loves me even regardless of what happened. Regardless of what I've done. Like, and that was pretty bad. Regardless, he still loves me.
Yeah. And
he doesn't hold that against me. And it's like, dude, come on. There's no person on earth that's ever done that. There's not a person.
No.
I mean, even the people who love us the most still sometimes remember or have those moments where we re-trigger some of the things we've done, where they're like, doing that again, huh? And it's like, wait a minute, I've done it before. Of course, you've kept count. You remembered. How could I forget? But it's like, God has a way of letting you know, that's not you. That's not how I see you. And that's beautiful to me. That right there, that was the part that just kind of like really changed my life, to realize that, wow, why have I never sat with a person who loves me more than I loved myself?
Yeah.
That was huge. That was wild. And I don't know, it just changed the way I see things. So you said that you're a father of 3 boys.
3 boys and a girl, yeah.
So what is it like raising men in this society now, and with all that you know, or all that you continue to learn?
Oh man. That's a loaded question. I mean, I think, look, it's funny, like, I get a lot of comments being a father of 4, like, how do you do it and all that kind of stuff. And, I honestly, whether you're a father of 4, 1, 2, whatever, it's hard. Right. I mean, there's no, playbook that is going to show you the right way. We're all trying to figure this out. Right. And most of the time stumbling through it. And, and each of my kids are completely different. So, what I did with one doesn't work with the other ones. Right. So it's constantly figuring them out as well. But, in terms of trying to raise them, it's really important, that Kelsey and I are trying to raise godly men and people that, know him and know what we believe, and hold that true even in the face of, adversity and, the other things in the world that are happening. Right. And it's a challenge, like right now my kids are, 12, 9, 6, and 3, right? So I've got a coming of age teenager, and I am, fearful and excited, and probably more fearful than anything of what's coming. And I'm basing that off of my teenage years. My 12-year-old's 100 times better than I was at his age. So I'm very grateful for that.
Right.
And it's funny because I never saw myself as a father at all.
Oh, wow.
I never saw myself as someone that could be that. And going back to, an undeserving kind of thing, I didn't feel like I was a father figure or someone that was deserving at the very least. And here I am, a father of 4, and, I couldn't imagine being anything else.
Right.
They are my life. And it's, but yeah, like we just try to do the best we can.
Right.
And it's interesting. So I'm going to give a little bit of Kelsey's journey because she did, wanted to tell a little bit. But we had Colton, our oldest, and then we had a second pregnancy. And I had actually found Kelsey on the floor. She had called me at work, and I came home, and she was on the floor, and we had to rush her to the hospital. And it was either going to be appendicitis or something wrong with the pregnancy, and it was an exploratory surgery. They took her back. Back there all through the night. I didn't know what was going on. Didn't know she was going to live or die. And it turned out that it was an ectopic pregnancy. So the baby basically got stuck in the fallopian tube, and it ruptured. And they had to do an emergency surgery to remove it. And, she was left with, only basically one fallopian tube, one side of her reproductive system. And that was rough. That was really rough to get over that. And then also the chance of becoming pregnant again was very slim. We ended up getting pregnant again. It was a roller coaster, throughout the pregnancy to make sure everything was okay. And then we had Jackson, and we actually named him as such because it means, at least the way we have it spelled, is God has shown favor. And so we felt blessed that we had the opportunity after going through that to have a second child. We were so grateful. And then pregnant again, lost another one. And that was really hard. Took a toll on Kelsey. But then lo and behold, God wasn't done, and we had 2 more children. So when people ask, like, why do you have so many? It's a lot of it's because if you'd known the journey, then you would know how blessed and grateful we are to have just another one, much less 3 more. And then again, Piper was a complete surprise and miracle in its own right. But the thing that I think that we took away from that was really important that we learned after the first loss is, and again, it's more for Kelsey, I would say, than me. It's hard for a man to understand, to grasp that kind of loss. It hurts, absolutely, but you didn't carry it. It wasn't with you. Like, it's much more difficult for her. And what we found is that it happens a lot. Like, a lot. It's just people don't talk about it.
Right.
And that's another, one of those things. It's like, it's not just men, I guess, that, pull up by your bootstraps, but it's almost like women feel ashamed that they had lost this baby. And it's like, as a man, like, I'm looking and I'm like, how silly is that? But I can't relate. I have no idea what that would be like. But she and I, also believe this as well, feel like more people should talk about it.
Right.
Because just like we men, need maybe a men's group to be able to feel like we have the permission to be, feel or have we can learn something from somebody else's testimony or be picked up. I think women need that as well, to feel like, hey, it's not your fault, it's okay, and to have that support.
Right. No, and it's funny you say that because I was in a conversation not too long ago with a person who said, you have to remember that a lot of women are brought up believing that their primary job is to give them men kids, to birth kids.
Yeah.
And so when you can't do that, or it doesn't work out, a lot of times that makes a woman feel the way we feel if we can't bring something to the table. If we can't hunt,
because all their worth is in that, and
that's how it's sold to them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times our worth is sold to us in a manner of, like, if you can't bring something to the table, if you're not doing something to provide to this house, then what kind of man are you?
Right.
And so, like, we don't want to be looked at, and we don't want to talk about that, like, oh, well, I've been out of work for like the past half a year, and I'm just, like, that's something that to a lot of men, that there's a shame that they carry with that, and that I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I can't get over this hump and do this and perform, not only for my family, but how am I going to look if it gets outside the family and people start talking about me and, yeah, he's not really providing for his family. And it's like, how am I going to look as a man when I've always been taught that my worth is in what I can provide? And so, yeah, that's definitely one that I think that men need to continue the conversation on, continue to talk about, realizing that we've all gone through that season. I remember when my son was first conceived, I had no job. And imagine going to your woman's parents' house to tell them that, so yes, I look forward to having a child with your daughter. By the way, right now I'm out of work. Like, that's not how that should go. Like, you almost don't even want to bring that up. But I remember that it came up, and I remember how I felt, and it was just like, I gotta do something. I gotta do something. Like, I don't know what they're thinking right now, but it doesn't feel good. And so I gotta do something, when I could have honestly been told, hey, look, you know what? You're gonna do it, and don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't feel like you're less of a man because in this situation right now where you're preparing for your first child, you don't even have the proper, we're talking about how are you going to take care of our daughter, but you and the baby she's carrying, and you don't even have a job to do it. And it's like that. Yeah, that can be hard. That's one of those stories where men need to talk about that more, to say, you know what, it's okay.
Right.
You're still going to be a provider, and it doesn't make you less of a provider if she's working right now. And you're taking care of your things at home. You're at home preparing for it. You're doing the nesting stuff that a lot of people like to contribute to women and just say, oh, well, yeah, women go through a nesting phase. No, men can go through that as well.
Yeah.
We can be sitting there dusting and what's wrong with you? You okay? Because you've dusted that like 3 times now. You can never dust it enough. I mean, I don't want the baby to inhale dust. So it's important to kind of like break those stigmas of who's supposed to wear that or carry that or be that for the family, to allow people to realize that we got a lot of strengths outside of just me being a hunter. Hey, look, I could be an awesome stay-at-home father, not stay-at-home mom, because it kills me when people say, hey, you're a stay-at-home mom. No, I'm a stay-at-home dad. Now, I'm not one, but I'm just saying it's okay to be one.
Right.
So it's just, I feel like you said, those conversations are just as important as the ones that we have about all the other stuff we talk about.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of these, I feel like some of the stigmas too are self-imposed. You know what I mean? Like there's I feel like a lot of times we don't talk about it because, we feel like we can't or we shouldn't, but no one else is saying that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's, again, that guilt or that shame or whatever it's coming from or originating from, but it's not necessarily reality. It's something that maybe is self-imposed. But the fact that it's, widespread, it says something, right? It says that we're all kind of feeling that way. Many of us, feel like we can't talk about this stuff. It's interesting.
And I also feel like it's the conversations we have in our head that we start to have that we hear echoing, telling us how we shouldn't have that conversation. Think about what they're going to say. Think about what they're going to hear. Think about how they're going to perceive you. And a lot of time it keeps us from the healing we need in those conversations, but we constantly hear this echo of the enemy just telling us how, no, they're going to judge you. No, don't do that. Look at how you're going to look. Look at them. They have everything together. Don't you want to be perfect like them? And it's like, that's not the reality of things. They weren't, there's no such thing as perfect, because I know a lot of people probably think, well, this guy's got to have it all figured out. He's got to be the perfect dad. He's got 4 kids. He's got to figure this out. Maybe he can give me the manual.
No.
But dude, look, dude, I know we make this look good when we step out the house, but if you could only have been in the house and we were getting ready, it wasn't as pretty as it looked.
No, it's complete chaos. It's canned chaos for sure. And the other thing too is, I think when you get that nudge where you need to talk about it or you need to share or let other people know it's okay, and you feel that because of you're going to be judged or or you just don't want to, whatever that is, it may not be for you, right? And I think that going back to, I think we maybe touched on it, the power of testimony is, and then being in a men's group, it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't even happen a lot, right? Because we're still men, and I know that people are still holding things in. I, myself included, have been in my men's group several times where I almost, but I didn't. And I'm like, gosh, I probably should have. Because when someone else shares and they become vulnerable, like, it does give you that permission, or it awakens something, within you that takes you back. Like, I could tell you a story. More recently, I had a guy in our men's group, and he came, let it out that he had gone through a kind of a season recently, and he was really struggling. And the way he articulated it was back to the feeling that I mentioned earlier when I lost my mom and I felt that nothingness, like the detachedness, or at least that's what it awoke in me. Mm-hmm. And, that was something I had kind of buried, put away. But it resurfaced it. And then when it did, it made me think of things a little differently. And I went back after my men's group that morning, and I went into the house, and I pulled Kelsey aside, and I had a conversation with her, and I told her I was sorry. Because what I realized this time was when that reawoke and I revisited that feeling and that time, was that I wasn't a good husband. And she was alone, trying to navigate that time, take care of our kids, right? Being pregnant, take care of me, wondering what the heck's going on with me. Am I going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? And I'd never acknowledged that. If he had not said something, that may not have happened.
But so I'm curious though. Do you feel like what he may have triggered inside of you may have triggered more of a story that you told yourself that made you feel bad, made you feel like, wow, I wasn't in a place to be good to her or be good, but maybe in that season it was her time to be able to be the strong one.
Maybe. Absolutely.
And carry things, because I know I personally have realized that sometimes listening to other people's stories, whether it be sitting at this table or sitting at a table at a restaurant, a lot of times I get triggered in ways that invoke things that I feel like I've healed from, but it comes back with a new narrative, a new story that my mind starts to formulate that comes across a lot of times very negative. It makes me feel really bad. It makes me feel like I should be ashamed, and maybe I should I owe people apologies. I feel I don't know, it hits me really hard to where I'm like, man, you were, and a lot of times I recognize that the trigger and the story that came along with the trigger made it, how would I say it? A lot of times they're just not true.
Right.
They're not there. There's no truth to it, but I didn't proof check them. I didn't go back and say, Rob, is that even true?
So there you go, right? Like, and I think that was the difference probably in this moment than probably maybe other moments was, is that I did have that conversation with her, and she was grateful. And I'm glad I did, because I wouldn't want to have to hold on to that and then it get worse, right? Because when you hold on to something like that, it just magnifies and gets worse and worse and worse.
It's like a fungus.
So I got it out, and that was great. but again, I mean, I don't think it would have happened had some other man not been willing to share, the season they were in.
Ooh, right.
And that gave me that okay, I feel like I need to do something. I don't want to hold on to this. I feel like I need to do something and say something. And I think that's the again, going back to the men's groups, I think there's a number of reasons you should do it. One, there's the camaraderie aspect, being able to just be around other men. There's the aspect of learning. That's why I originally was really intrigued, is just to kind of learn more, and grow off of other people. But then sometimes there's those really good moments,
right,
where people share and you get to just learn and see from other people's experiences,
right,
and to take that in and then grow from that.
Right.
So.
And honestly, the crazy thing is, I tell people that's exactly what goes on at this table. Because I know how there may be some men who don't have that community. They live somewhere where they don't have the privilege of being able to get together with other men. But I feel like even the conversations we have here, God uses in a way to not only give him the glory, but allow certain things to be open, certain doors to be open, certain triggers to happen in men's lives that almost allow them to get up from listening to these episodes and say, I need to face that. I need to go and talk to that person about that. That just made me feel some type of way, and I can't leave this conversation that I was just a part of as I sat there and listened to these men talk the same way that I walked into here and I sat down and listened to this conversation. So it opens up a door, not just for the men that we can actually reach out and touch, but the men that are listening somewhere on the other side of the world that needed to hear your conversation and your vulnerability today, to say, wow, I needed to hear that. And there's no way I may have ever sat down with Robby or got to actually meet him, but he still touched me even though I was never in his presence. And
So I'll give you an example. So I listened to some of your podcasts. We mentioned I listened to podcasts on my commutes. So I listened to yours, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, but a motivational speaker guy, and he was going and saying some pretty good stuff. And I used some of his stuff with my son, and it was the right time, right? The right message. And I took it and I probably rewound it like 5 times just to make sure I could get it right. And I texted my son that so it would motivate him because of the season, some of the season he was in and some of the things he was going through with school and everything else. And it's truth, right? I mean,
right.
I wasn't in the room. Like this could have been recorded weeks ago.
Right.
But I listened to it at the right time. I heard the thing I needed.
Right.
And I was able to channel it to him.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. See, that's and it's those moments where it's like God knows exactly what he's doing as he produces this show. As I was telling somebody recently, he's the producer of this show. He knows exactly what he's doing. Even when it comes to when I release episodes, it's like, well, God, I feel like I don't know how relevant this is. But it's like, what do you mean you don't know how relevant it is? You have to understand that one of these days, the conversation that happens today is going to touch somebody 20 years from now.
Yeah.
It's relevant now. As one of my mentors said one time, throw the wrath out to them. They need it now. It may not sound perfect. It may not look perfect. It may not be perfect, but it's exactly what they need to hear right now. So with that said, I'm so glad you could join me today to be able to allow God to use you, but more importantly, say yes to what you probably said and thought to yourself, like, I listen to podcasts. I don't go on podcasts.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad that I did this. It was a cool experience, and I was definitely uncomfortable stepping into this, but I'm really glad I did.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad you did. And I'm sure there are going to be men who are going to truly be able to be blessed by this conversation, as well as so many of the other conversations that have been had at this table and online. So I appreciate you joining me today. I appreciate all my guests for listening in today and just sitting with us and truly being able to experience almost like your own community, because this is your community. I want people to feel like they can come here and get those fire pit talks, those conversations that they want to have with other men, and maybe that will open the door for you to find your own community of men that you can actually share your story with. And as I tell people, I love to hear other people's stories. I love for people to inbox me and just kind of like tell me how this has been a blessing. That's something that truly, a lot of people say, well, who are your sponsors? My sponsors are the people who reach out and let me know that this has truly touched their life. That is what sponsors and keeps this podcast going. And so I appreciate that. I look forward to definitely continue conversation with you, Robby, in the future, as we are definitely in kind of the same church community and all. And I look forward to future conversations and all, and glad you guys could join today. Always want to thank my son and everybody that helps me produce this. And that's it. Hey, you guys be blessed. Thank you so much for joining.
We appreciate you listening today and hope that if you enjoyed this episode, you'll like and subscribe and also listen to past episodes. We hope to bring you great future content as well. Please comment your thoughts on this episode as well as leave any prayer requests below so that this community can pray alongside you. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at God's Glory and Israel Stories.
Brothers, we understand how the thoughts of even facing your own past and current story and the pain and hurt that come along with this is no easy task. But you're not alone, as you hear in these episodes. Nor has God forgotten you or left your side, as He's in it with you, fighting alongside you through the storms of life. He loves and has already forgiven you, no matter what you have done, and He wants a relationship with you. Your healing, freedom, and growth are important to God and to us as well. Maybe you're considering giving up or need someone to talk to. Here are a few resources that exist that we hope can shine a light into that dark place you're in. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. If you need support but are not in crisis, consider reaching out to a warm line with individuals who would love to talk with you. Speaking to someone on these calls is typically free and confidential and run by people who understand what it's like to struggle in life. Find a local number by going to warmline.org.